Hello everyone. Today we're continuing the Audiophilia 101 and the topic is carrying outdated beliefs and preconceptions through the years long beyond the time of their applicability. And as usual, I'll try to use audiophile preconceptions as a good example. But first, a story. A long time ago, among other things, I was studying ultra-high frequency electronics at the university, and it included all types of things like energy transfer through waveguides, back waves, wave impedance, attenuation, and many other things. And of course, that was part of the exam. That is, the professor was handing out waveguide parameters, and you were expected to calculate all those things right there live during the exam. But that was not a challenge. The challenge was that we were supposed to use physical devices from the 1950s called the nomograms to calculate all those things, and these looked scary. The thing is, the whole thing is based on electromagnetic equations, that is Maxwell equations, that's fine. But in the old times, when people didn't have access to computers, or there were no computers at all, they used all those nomograms that looked very much like a logarithmic scale, that you see it on the screen, but they were much scarier. One of these things, called the Smith chart, you see on the screen, and it looked as scary as it does on the screen, except for it was a physical device that you could rotate and figure out the values for any set of parameters. It felt like a tremendous waste of time, just delving back into the past and doing those calculations, and you had to use two of those nomograms in succession in order to get the result. What I realized is obviously what you needed to calculate is just an integral of a bulky but quite manageable function. You just needed the computational means for that. And here's the problem and the challenge. There were no computer terminals at the exam lab. And I was absolutely not going to read dozens of pages explaining how to use those outdated nomograms from the 1950s, just to use them once while they obviously looked like a completely obsolete technology. Well, that was the right time to ask the question, Jeeves, what do I do? Well, luckily, I was always a person who liked all the new and cool gadgets, and I owned one of the first programmable calculators of the time. You see it on the screen. That incredible magical machine could store as many as 105 primitive autocode commands and, believe it or not, up to 16 different values. It had 16 memory slots. Well, doesn't sound like much, but I managed to squeeze everything in, all the calculation, inside a program, within those 105 steps, and I have written them down on a sheet of paper because, once again, this calculator, this ancient machine from the 1980s, it didn't have permanent memory. As soon as you power it off, everything was lost. So the day of the exam comes, and obviously I bring the calculator and this sheet of paper with this machine code program with me, and I power it on, and I enter all the programmatic steps. I check it, that it produces the correct results. And when the time comes and I need to solve the equations and the professor gives out all those parameters, I ask him to wait for 45 seconds because those calculators were notoriously slow. And After 45 seconds, the machine ponders over it and produces the correct result. Obviously, it was just calculating the integral. And he looks at me and he feels puzzled. On one hand, I've solved the problem and produced the correct result. On another hand, he's completely convinced that I haven't got the slightest idea of how to use those nomograms. And obviously, he was right, I didn't. And he tries to figure out how to get me off this track. Finally, he comes up with a question. Okay, now we're sitting at the lab with electricity and your calculator is powered on. But imagine we're in the field and the calculator is off power and you are helpless. My reply, okay, how the fuck are you going to power this ultra-high frequency generator and the waveguide to generate an electromagnetic wave in the field without electricity? Okay, happy end. I did pass the exam with flying colors. But what we're talking about is outdated, obsolete preconceptions that we sometimes carry with us much longer than we need to. One important remark. This nomogram technology, it's absolutely solid. It produced correct results 80 years ago, and it could produce them now if used properly. There is nothing wrong with it as such, except for nowadays there are considerably more efficient, faster, and more universal ways of getting all the right solutions and calculations done. Now, back to audiophilia. It's exactly the same thing when we're talking about vinyl and tubes. Oh, I know. One person commented on one of my previous podcasts and said, you know what, good podcast, but probably should never touch 3 topics. That is, politics, religion, and cables. Well, now I'm going even further and touching more sacred cows. Anyway, here are the hard facts. Vinyl recordings and tube amplifiers are absolutely fine. They can produce very good sound quality. The fact is, they're just outdated and obsolete, and modern technology can easily replace them with something better. Second, the thing is, they were better years ago. Early transistor-based solid-state amplifiers really sucked. Their distortion was much higher compared to tested and trusted tube-based designs. The same applies to CDs. When they first came on the market, the technology was going through its youth or even childhood years, and obviously it was not as refined. Both analog to digital and digital to analog converters were rather basic, and the sound was far from optimal. So actually vinyl sounded better in the 80s and tube amplifiers sounded better in the 60s and 70s of the previous century. And that's exactly the root cause of the issue. Older audiophiles have carried these concepts over from the old times when they were actually true, and they stayed inside this bubble despite the fact that the world has changed and they are completely closed to the new brave world and a very exciting one of digital recording and solid-state amplifiers. Scrolling forward to today, there is no question left. Modern solid-state Class D amplifiers are more silent, are distortion-free, more powerful, more energy efficient compared to all older designs, including tube-based ones. High-res digital files and even CDs sound way better than LPs, I mean vinyl discs, that have considerably lower dynamic range, as far as the mastering is done right. That's just a fact. It doesn't mean that you need to throw away or part with your turntable or hundreds of vinyl discs or tube amps. Once again, this technology is absolutely solid and works just fine and produces good sound. No question about it. But if you're just starting, do not listen to older audiophiles with a lot of preconceptions. Modern technology is more affordable, sounds better, and it's just a much better solution nowadays if you are starting from scratch or if you are going to expand your existing vinyl system, period. Also, for example, high-res digital files are typically cheaper than the same album as a vinyl LP disc, and it's considerably more portable, to put it mild. That is exactly why it's so important to stay curious and informed and never get immersed into the old, outdated technobabbles and sticky ideological concepts. It's very important to explore new horizons, technologies, ideas, whether it's AI or digital audio or Class D amplifiers or whatever else. Sounds familiar? Because it is. Sticking to outdated ideas results in nothing else but distorted decision-making, both in our private and business lives. That way, we waste money, we purchase a lot of things or services that we do not need or that can be replaced by something considerably more efficient. Many of these old concepts may have been true at a certain moment in time years ago, but they're no longer relevant due to either technological progress or our evolution of the whole knowledge about this world. This is exactly how we overpay for goods and services, or losing efficiency, or making the wrong decisions, or purchasing or getting something that we absolutely do not need. I wish you a very good day, and I really hope that you stay connected and up to date on everything that's important.